What Mike and I would like to do now are go over some of the elements that differentiate a good swing from a bad swing. We're going to start with one of the chief differentiators, that is the left shoulder, and how it works on the backswing. Mike?
Beginning with a good player, the freedom and what Andy's talking about is the freedom of the left shoulder, how far downward it goes on the backswing. And the low handicapper, the good player, expert player, the freedom of the left shoulder is much greater than the highest handicapper. The highest handicapper's left shoulder sometimes begins to go down, but after it goes down a little bit, it starts raising up to the point that it's much further from the ground at the top of the swing.
So what Mike's saying is that when you set up your left shoulder, it should move as we view it from this view. One more time, please, Mike. Downward and inward, okay? Such that when the shoulders are turned, they're 90 degrees. They are centered, okay? The axis doesn't move. One more time, please, Mike. One more time, please. Touch more side tilt. There we go. One more time, just like that. Would look like that. Okay, now, the poorer player, as Mike was saying, their shoulder turns too level to the ground. It doesn't go down enough. And when that happens, that pulls the head one of two directions, or both. It pulls the head backwards and or upwards. Okay, now this causes a host of problems. First, if the center of the shoulder turn moves backward because the left shoulder didn't go down enough, and the golfer doesn't move that piece forward enough coming down, if they stay back, okay, the golfer will be inclined to hit too far behind the ball. Now, what some expert golfers have learned to do is they turn this thing down pretty well, okay? Now, one more time, please, Mike. And then right at the end, their shoulders will level out and their head will move back, which would make them hit the ball just as behind the ground, just the same as the poor golfer, okay? But the expert golfer, who translates back just a little bit, moves the knees and hips forward fast enough so that the swing can still bottom out in front of the ball. That part, I think, gets left out in a lot of the teaching. So it makes absolutely no sense, first of all, to try to move your head back and to lose the precision of the circle of the shoulder turn, first. Second, when it inadvertently happens, okay, when it inadvertently happens, the expert player moves his knees, flexes his knees far enough forward to move the center of the shoulder turn far enough forward to hit the ball. The result of that swing would just be an excessive push, or the overdraw type of swing that Mike was demonstrating earlier. The poorest player, when they go back with their shoulder moving too level to the ground, they don't have the perspective or the awareness to move forward enough, fast enough. They stay back coming down and hit behind the ball. Okay, so one of the main differentiators then that you should understand is the shoulders, and that the left shoulder's got to go evenly downward and inward. If we turn around from the back view, you'll remember on our DVD, on our first DVDs, that the shoulder should turn on a tilted angle. It's the downward component of this shoulder turn, okay, that allows this shoulder to stay turning on a tilted angle. Mike, what's that? What's the piece that gives the shoulder turn its downward component?
That would be the side tilt on the backswing. Tilting the spine to the left lowers the left shoulder.
So what we're saying to you is the moment the spine stops tilting to the left throughout the course of the backswing is the moment that the axis of the shoulder turn moves back. That's what you need to know. Okay, one more time, please. So Mike could conceivably turn this shoulder turn back correctly for a little while, then stop tilting to the left and keep turning, and the head would move back. The worst golfers don't turn the shoulder, don't tilt to the left at all, and right off the ball they go straight up and back. Okay, so again, the shoulder turns evenly downward and inward. The downward component is supplied by the tilting to the left. Okay, as we look at it from the down the line view, that helps the shoulders to turn in a circle on a tilted angle. Okay, the second piece that differentiates a good swing from a poorer swing in our mind is the hand path. Okay, and Mike, what about the hand path as a differentiator between a good swing and a bad swing?
We've talked about the width in the swing. In this case, we're talking about the distance the hands move inward on the backswing. How far and how long they keep moving inward on the backswing.
So this distance, right, Mike?
Correct.
Okay, the best swings, whenever they swing back, they move back on a tilted angle, consistently, evenly on a tilted angle. They don't make any loops. Okay, now, when Mike swings this club back, as we previously discussed, you have the understanding now that the hands are moving on an angle, which is a circle on the ground. So we went ahead and put our circles on the ground to give the map for the club head and the hands. I'm going to put my club right here for a second, and you'll be able to see Mike's hand path moving in an arc as he goes back. Okay, one more time please, Mike, and you'll remember that golf being played on a tilted angle means that Mike's hands keep moving in an arc around him. Now, what happens to a lot of golfers is at some point during the backswing, the hand path starts to deviate from the circle. And what would be the piece, Mike, that would make the hands stop going inward and start going more upward?
First thing would be the hips would stop turning. The knee flex needs to keep changing, where the knees are at address flexed. As I start back, my knee flex is changing, which is allowing my hips to turn. And when my hips turn more, it allows my hands to keep going inward or deeper on my backswing.
So what Mike's saying then is by releasing his knee flex, by changing the flex of his knees then, that frees his hips up to turn, which allows his hands to keep making trace this angle on the ground. At some point in the swing, what a lot of amateurs or poorer players do is they stop flexing the knees, which stops turning the hips, which stops turning the shoulder, and it makes the hand path do what, Mike?
Start lifting.
It makes the hands start to go upward. Now, that is the beginning of the over-the-top motion, or the swing that goes over the top, is the hands start to come outward before the end of the backswing. So if you're having problems slicing the ball, you should remember that you need to release your hips, release your knee flex to turn your hips to allow your hands to keep tracking inward evenly on this circle. Mike will give you an example here. Okay, now if he does it incorrectly one more time, if he keeps the knee flexed, stops the hips, stops the shoulders, you can see that if the arms keep going, the arm lifts above the shoulders. Okay, that's a beginning of the problem of swinging across the ball. We'd like to give you a couple of checkpoints so that you can trace your hand path. So when Mike does this demonstration here, you'll notice when he swings back, when he reaches the point to where his hands are the level of his belt, okay, keep going please, you'll notice how the hands pass right through the edge of his belt. As he continues to track back through the backswing, you'll notice that as the hands pass through his bicep, how they go through it like the base to the middle of his bicep. So when you're doing your practice swings, want me to stay right there, Mike? When you're doing your practice swings, you'll watch your hand path and you'll see that it goes right through the base to the middle of the bicep. It does not go, one more time please, Mike. Mike will do it correctly, I'll do it incorrectly. Let's start again please. Sorry Mike, we'll go back on 3, 1, 2, 3. It does not go back too straight like this because I didn't straighten my knee, turn my hips, lifted my arms up. Okay? So, as we pick up, as we continue through the backswing, then Mike went through the belt, on through the base to the middle of his bicep. As he continued on to the top of his backswing, depending on how long his swing would be, if his swing stops short of parallel to the ground, the arm should not reach the shoulder line. Okay? Because it'll only reach the shoulder line if the shaft goes all the way up to parallel to the ground. That's an important distinction to understand too. Okay? One more time, please. So it goes through the belt, through the base to the middle of the bicep. As it continues on, if it went up to a full swing, it would come right up to the line of the left arm, or right up to the line of the shoulders, but only if the shaft reached parallel to the ground. Perfect, Mike. One more time, please. Like that. Okay, the point we're trying to make here, again, is that the hand path needs to make a circle or an arc on the ground all the way back. It should not go back on this arc for a little while and then start coming upward like this, okay, which transcribed on the ground would look this way, like that. Okay, one more time, incorrectly. So I'll do Mike on the ground going like this, okay? It should go like this. Very common for people to, at some point, let their hand path leave the circle. You need to release your knee flex. You need to allow your hips to turn on a tilted angle. Finally, you need to make sure that your hips aren't sliding back too far.
One other note on that would be the amount of flexion in the arms too on the backswing. We just have the players put tees under their armpits to keep their arms from lifting above their shoulders, and then keep the arms feeling relatively straight compared to letting them overflex.
That's correct. Excuse me, Mike. To Mike's point there about the arms not lifting off the body when you go back, a good reference for that would be, remember that the elbow, when you sit up here, is like 3 inches from your rib cage. Okay, when you swing back to the top of the backswing, that elbow should still be 3 inches, indicating that he just went like this, that there was no lifting of the arms off the rib cage. Okay, and I'd like to just touch on briefly as we make our last point about this hand path, about how the linear motion of the hips going back affects the hand path. Would you just describe that, please?
If I move my hips linear on my backswing to the right, like so, what that does from down the line is it makes my hand path go further down the line in a straight line. It's difficult to have the hands and the club move in the circle if I'm moving my hips or sliding them linear on my backswing.
Correct. Now, as we get deeper into the variables here, Mike, what would happen to the hand path then if you did the opposite and you shift your weight to the left faster and straightened your leg earlier? What would happen to the hand path?
Hand path would go in faster and more.
The hand path would go in the most, like that. So now we have a preference for how fast the left leg and right leg change their flexion. Okay, go ahead and sit up again. So we'll touch on those right now, the rate that the knees change their flex. What you should take from this though is that the more Mike shifts his weight forward and straightens his legs earlier and earlier, that pulls his hands inward the most and helps him to hit out at the ball the most. Conversely,
do that one more time from this view. Right leg straightens faster, my weight goes forward, my hips turn more, hand path goes in more.
And what's the pattern on the ball, Mike, on those shots?
Bigger pushes, bigger draws.
The ability to push the ball the farthest to the right and to curve the ball to the left the sharpest. That's the pattern that someone would do if they were doing that. Okay, now, if we were to just go back the way we would prescribe it, if Mike swings back and he stops where let's say he stops where his shaft is parallel to the ground, you'll see that the right knee has just begun to flex, the left knee has just begun to flex, the right knee has just began to straighten. It's only a few degrees from the stance line here, okay? Such that if he stops where his left arm is parallel to the ground, now the front leg is flexed, say, 10 degrees, the back leg is straightened, say, 10 degrees, okay? But it's not completely straight at that point. Okay, so if you're doing this swing and you swing back and it is completely straight by the time the left arm is parallel to the ground, it's very likely that your hands are going inward a little bit faster, your weight is moving a little bit more forward, and you can expect to be able to push and draw the ball the most. Okay, so that's how a person would use the knee flex and the hip turn to control the path of the club, correct?
Correct.
Such that if we took that onto the top of the backswing, now the right leg would have flexed, say, 5 more degrees, okay? 15 degrees to where this one's almost straight, okay? So we started out, say both knees are flexed, say 20 degrees. We went 5 degrees, 5 degrees, flexing and straightening. 5 degrees, 5 degrees, flexing and straightening. 5 degrees, 5 degrees, flexing and straightening evenly throughout the course of the backswing. If it was slower, the hands would have went up more. If it was faster, flexing and straightening, freeing the hip up to turn earlier, the hands could be pulled inward more. Okay?
Good.
So what you can see here is that there's a number of variables that act upon the hand path and how that, in effect, controls the path of the club, and it's a major differentiator between good swings and bad.
We're going to start with another major differentiator in a good swing versus a bad swing, and that's the linear motion of the hips on the downswing and follow through. Andy's going to demonstrate where the weight is at the top of the swing. Our model for this straight or slight draw, the weight's 60-40 on his left at the top of the swing. As he starts down, the hips are moving more forward. The knee flex is starting to flex again on the way down. So the right leg's flexing, the left knee is also flexing, and the left knee is in front of the left ankle. When the club's parallel to the ground, left knee's 2 inches in front of the left ankle, left hip's 2 inches in front of the ankle. At this point, the knee flex and the left leg is starting to straighten, but not completely straight. At impact, the left knee is now 1 inch in front of the left ankle. The hip's also 1 inch in front of the left ankle as it's starting to straighten. Now, after he's hit the ball, the left leg is now straight. Left ankle, left knee, left hip, they're all in a straight line, and the hips have gone as far forward as they can, or nearly all the way forward.
I think it's important to understand there what the differentiation is here. Most times the poorest players, when they swing back, they move their hips back like this. Then they come forward a little while, then they start to go back again. The result of that is that makes the club come across the ball with its cause of pulling and excessive slicing of the ball depending on the angle of the club face. This is why we make the statement that if every person was told to keep their weight forward and to take their hands in, that we'd have generations of golfers swinging outward more at the ball.
Right, and a question's often asked how far the hips should go forward on the downswing or the through swing, and we always tell everyone to go the furthest they can. So whatever the maximum slide is with the hips, that's what you want in your swing.
This is important not only for the path of the club, but it's going to be important in just a second when we start to talk about creating power and controlling the path of the club on the driver as the ball is moved forward.
And launching balls higher in the air.
Let's go ahead, Mike, and get that driver out and we'll demonstrate that. because I'll tee this ball up. There's been a lot of conversation, it seems, on golf broadcasts about how the weight being forward makes the angle of descent in the swing too steep. Would you agree with that or disagree, Mike?
I disagree.
Okay, and why would that be?
Well, in this swing, we know that if the weight's forward, you can hit out at the ball longer, which produces the draws. Also enables the path of the club to come in at a shallower angle where you can launch the ball higher in the air.
Could I explain that in just a little more detail? What Mike's saying there is that as I move the ball forward, as I do with the driver, my hips move more inches forward with a driver than they do with a 5-iron. So when I come down, the hips move more and more forward like this. What that does is that tilts my spine more degrees without moving the axis of the shoulder turn back. That's an important distinction to make, because it's the hips moving forward that keep tilting that spine. That does a couple of things. As Mike said, it keeps the descent of the club shallow enough to not hit down at the ball, and it keeps the path of the club moving outward at the ball. Like we said, the worst golfers at some point stop moving their hips forward, the spine stops tilting to the right, and at the second the spine stops tilting to the right, the club loses the arc that it's on. It starts to come across the ball at that exact instant. So moving the hips forward tilts the spine, which keeps the path of the club going out and keeps the descent from being too steep. But there's another piece, isn't there, Mike, that keeps this swing, that makes this descent and ascent of the club even shallower. What would that be?
Well, the knee flex coming out and the belt getting higher when you get to your finish. That's another one.
That's correct, and this is really important for golfers to understand. When I hit this ball to hit this driver, the handle of my club should be in front of the ball. That's what gives the swing its circular motion coming into the ball, as we previously discussed. There seems to also be some misunderstanding that in golf that makes people think that the more the handle is forward that you have to hit down at the ball. Well, when I come through, if I do as Mike said, if I release my knee flex, if I start standing up and extending my spine, those are the pieces that make the club come up out off the ground. That's what keeps the descent shallow and the ascent steeper. Correct?
Correct.
So if I demonstrate this one more time coming through, if I come down and if I keep my knee flex and don't extend my spine, my club always crashes into the ground with a steep descent. Okay, now, but if I come down and as the club gets heavier, I start to release my knee flex and extend my spine like this, that keeps the descent flat and actually makes the club come up out of the ground like that. Like Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods coming, the angle of ascent of the club comes straight up in the air.
So Andy, you're saying keeping the handle forward shallows the hit. It doesn't make a bigger divot, it actually shallows the hit.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Mike, is keeping the handle forward with the extension of the spine makes the hit shallower, not steeper, and it enables the golfer to hit the ball with the face open to the target, not closed, which is another very important piece to understand. The problem with golf that people are having is that as we move the ball from the pitching wedge farther forward to the driver, the hips need to move more forward. Well, we've got masses of people moving their hips back like this because they're taught, and then they're told not to slide their hips on the downswing, that's a death move. So they turn their hips out of the way, they swing across the ball and peel it off to the right. If the golfer did the opposite, if they moved the weight forward, moved the hips the most linear like this, release the knee flex, they could hit out at the ball with the face open and hit the biggest push draw that didn't cross the hole, which is the shot that the masses don't hit. Would you say that's accurate, Mike?
That's accurate.
Okay. Was there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think, again, some people might want to hear that in simpler terms.
Okay, break it down for me.
Okay, so the whole objective here Andy was demonstrating was to hit this ball, especially a driver, with a shallow angle of descent, launching the ball high, and being able to hit the ball far. And the elements were the handle being forward, the hips sliding forward, changing the tilt in the spine, and the hips getting up high on the follow through. So just said in a few less words,
yes,
you could say, push your hips forward, raise your belt up, so the belt's high, tuck your butt, keep your arms straight or straighter, and keep the handle of the club or this flying wedge we've talked about in the past, keep that intact. Do not roll your wrists. So belt high, tuck the butt, arms straight.
Hopefully we've highlighted here the importance of how far forward and how long the hips need to move. And the golfer begins to have an appreciation for what happens to the poorest golfers whose hips start turning without moving forward, and how that starts to pull the swing more across the ball. This will benefit you as you learn to recognize the curves on the ball, and it'll help you to be able to differentiate between slices, the causes of slices and draws.
We're going to demonstrate the weight distribution starting with address, backswing, downswing, follow through. In that order, Andy's got 55% of his weight on his left foot at address. As he starts back, the weight's just slightly going more forward to his left leg, so that at the top of his swing it's 60-40 left. Knee flex change, the hips turned in a circle, actually move just a degree more forward on the backswing. On the downswing, the weight starts moving further forward, so when his left arm's parallel to the ground, the weight is 70-30 forward. When the club gets down to parallel to the ground, the weight's 80-20 forward on his left. When he hits the golf ball, the weight's 90-10 forward. When the club is parallel to the ground on the through swing, the weight's 95-5. So he's almost got entirely all of his weight on his left foot at this time. Then at the finish, it's still 95-5.
Correct. I think what that illustrates is the continual movement forward of the hips as one begins the backswing and the downswing, and that there's no motion to the right.
I'd like to add one detail on that just to help people recognize what they need to work on when they hit the ball. As far as the weight goes, if somebody's having a problem drawing the golf ball, they hit too many pulls and cuts, their swing might feel entirely linear when they're practicing, meaning that their hips feel like they just slide forward and don't turn at all. The person that pushes and draws the ball more, they may need to keep their weight forward, but start adding more rotary or more turn to their swing as they follow through. Any good examples of somebody who hits the ball that way?
Some great examples. The example of the person who just does the linear component like this with minimal turn and hits the biggest push draws that people might be familiar with would be Tom Lehman or Phil Mickelson or Alan Doyle. Great drawers of the ball. Great. When I say drawers, I also mean people who hit out at the ball. They could aim to the left and actually push cut the ball as well. But we'll say, for simplicity's sake, great push drawers of the ball. So Mickelson, Tom Lehman, Alan Doyle would fall into that category. Some examples of people who swung across the ball would be who, Mike?
Bruce Litsky.
Todd Hamilton. These guys would be guys whose legs straightened up, hips went back, and they hit across the ball more. And just so we're all clear, that would demand a club face that would be more closed to the target to keep the ball from over slicing.
Next differentiator I'd like to cover is the amount of flex in the arms throughout the swing. If you look at a dress with Andy, his arms are almost straight right here. Left arm straight, the right arm might have just a little bit of flex in it. As he starts turning back to the top of his swing, his left arm stays straight and the right arm flexes. It flexes to 90 degrees. It does not flex more than that on the backswing. And remember, again, this is a model hit this ball the straightest, farthest, most often. Show everybody, Andy, what it would look like if we were just trying to hit it far.
If we were just concerned about hitting the ball the farthest, we would start on the backswing, we would start extending our spine even more like this. We'd even push our hips back like this. We'd push our hips this way, extend our spine more to the left, bend our arms like this, lift them off the rib cage like this. That's what our backswing would look like if we were just concerned with hitting the ball the farthest. It would look like this.
The arms would flex more on that part of the swing if we were just trying to hit it ball far.
But we're not. We're trying to hit the ball the farthest, the straightest, the most often.
So to keep this club and hands and arms moving on their circle, the left arm straight, the right arm's flexed only 90 degrees here, and the arms are not lifting above the shoulders.
Just one note on that, Mike. A common problem I see is in the poorest players is right off the bat, when they swing back, they pull the butt of the club up like this, too close to them, okay, and that begins pulling their elbows apart and reduces the amount that their wrists can hinge. The best players, when they swing back, they do their side tilt to the left. They keep the handle pushing away from them, but in relation to the ground, the handle actually comes up in relation to the ground like this without pulling inward to them too much. So it would look like that, as opposed to the worst players going like that.
If you go back to halfway back again, Andy, the left arm is only moves 45 degrees maximum to the chest right here. So Andy's arm is not pinned against his chest completely.
So it's not going like that,
only
right?
45.
And that motion in and of itself helps to regulate the flexion in the right arm. So it's only going this far. Okay.
Another piece that can help regulate how far the arms are going to move and how much they flex is how close together they stay too.
The elbows.
The elbows.
Okay. If we look at that from down the line, remember we set up and we said the elbows were at, say, 10 inches apart at the setup. Remember I said a second ago the worst players, a lot of them pull the butt of the club upwards like this and flex their elbow upside their rib cage like that, which reduces the amount their wrists can cock or hinge like that. The best players do their side tilt, trace their hand path. When they go back, their elbows stay the same distance apart while the butt of the club travels the same distance from their torso. It doesn't get closer. And it's that getting closer of the butt of the club to the body that starts to pull the arms apart. Okay, so there's the backswing. A little bit of detail on the flexion, over flexion of the arms that we see is very common in poorer players. How about the downswing and the follow through, Mike?
I just want to make one more note on the backswing. What that can do to someone's swing when their elbows start pulling apart, like Andy demonstrated, is that when they flex their arms this much, most of those people do not have enough wrist cock. They get the feeling of having leverage by flexing their arms, and what they really need to do is keep their arms straight or elbows closer together so that the wrists begin to hinge enough.
So Mike, let's say you've got this problem. A student of yours has this problem. They're flexing the arms, pulling the elbows apart. They've got serious lack of clubhead speed and compression on the ball. How do you tell them to go about practicing this piece? What do you tell them?
First, I tell them just to feel like their arms are straight.
No flexion, right?
Right.
So you tell them to just keep their arms straight.
Keep side tilting, move the hands in, but feel like the arms are just straight.
And Then what do you tell them to do?
Then I start telling them to focus on hinging the wrists with the arms feeling like they're straight. So there's side tilt to the left, hands move in a circle, wrists start to hinge, but the arms feel straight. You'd be surprised people look at the film of their swing and they feel like their arms are straight and their right arm's now just flexing about 90 degrees. So they feel like this, but in reality that arm's flexing 90 now.
Correct. Okay, is that okay with you for the backswing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hopefully you've got some good details there on the flexion of the arms and how that relates to the elbows and wrist cock on the backswing. Now, how about the downswing and the follow-through?
Downswing, the tendency for the poorer players that they straighten their right arm too soon. And when they straighten their right arm too soon, that pushes the club out away from the shoulder, which is typically called, losing the lag or losing the radius of the swing. So the poorer player straightens their right arm too fast, club starts coming out across the golf ball, starts hitting behind the golf ball as well. The circle that gets too big. What the better player does, and sometimes to a fault, is the right elbow stays flexed longer, the weight goes further forward, and the player starts hitting out too far at the golf ball. So that you can see Andy's kept his right elbow flexed the same degree, 90 degrees, all the way down to where the club's parallel to the ground. That makes the swing's radius get smaller, the circle gets smaller. Andy can hit much further forward on the ground doing it that way.
But what happens to the path if I do that?
If he does that, the path of the club starts swinging out to the right too far. Excessive pushes, overdraws.
So Mike, what happens on the downstroke with the poorer players what's the pattern with the flexion of their arms as they come through the ball?
The pattern for the poorer players is that they'll start flexing their arms more as they hit the golf ball and go to their follow through. So the elbows will come apart, the arms flex, the club passes the hands, they lose the extension on their follow through. And that can happen for a number of reasons, but first of all, the player should know that, or realize or recognize that they're not supposed to let the arms flex again until after the arms are parallel to the ground.
So if we walk the golfer through just the model of the flexing of the right arm and then the straightening of the arms on the follow through, I think that might help.
Okay.
Okay, want to go ahead, Mike?
Sure. At address, both arms just feel they're straight.
Okay.
As you go turn, side tilting, hand path goes in, the right arm begins to flex and it flexes to 90 degrees. Left arm staying straight. And as this club starts coming down, the right arm begins to straighten slowly. So when the left arm or the club is parallel to the ground, the right arm is straightened but is not completely straight. The left arm is still straight. At impact, the left arm's straight, the right arm is straightened a little bit more, but still has some flex in it at this point when you're hitting the golf ball. After the ball's hit, both arms are straight. When the club is parallel to the ground, both arms are straight. After the club's parallel to the ground, the wrists begin to recock and the left arm starts to flex more, to the point where at the top of the follow through, the left arm's flex 90 degrees, the right arm's flex maybe 20 degrees. Wrists are recocked 90. So most people would feel like, if they haven't experienced that before, Andy's demonstration here is that both arms are straight. However, after the arms are parallel to the ground, both arms do begin to flex.
And just from my perspective, I think the ordinary amateur golfer doesn't have the capacity to recognize how long those arms are straight. So in that vein, we would advise you to keep practicing with your arms completely straight on your finish. Mike, can we do just a little bit of a demonstration now on what would make the shaft raise up the most through the ball? What causes that?
Well, there's a few things. The player standing up too quickly.
Okay, and you remember that we discussed that the golfer, as he swings through the time and space of the swing, that he was supposed to go from flexion to extension like this throughout his swing. And we've also discussed how that's one of the preliminary elements of creating power. But if the golfer merely stands up as fast as possible without swinging the club, and they just jump up without swinging the club, the early extension, as we call it, would raise the shaft up too early, too fast. Okay, and that would create this effect. Could you show us that from down the line, Mike? So what would happen is that Mike, in his inclination here, if he extended upward too early, too fast, that would have the effect of raising the shaft up at impact. Okay, now, if he does that again, okay, you see the early extension, how that's making the path of the club drop too far inward, raising the shaft up at impact. That's having the effect of throwing the path of the club outward, and combined with this low handle turned grip setup is maximizing the closing of the face. It is not, we repeat, more rolling of the club. It is more uncocking of the club with a closed attachment that you need to be aware of in these overhooks.
Another factor would be the hands not being in enough.
Boy, you said it. This has been a huge topic of conversation with a lot of the best players. I can name a number of names, I won't, who've had this piece misunderstood. The question is what's making the shaft raise up? We discussed number one would be early extension, didn't we, Mike?
Right.
And then we also discussed another, and you said that the arms being out too far, correct?
Right. If the player's hands didn't go back on deep enough, inward enough on the backswing, and there you get and then they're too far out on the downswing, meaning out towards the target line, too far. The only way to hit the inside of the ball is for the shaft to start raising up.
Correct. Correct. Now, Mike, if you'll get back, jump up and sit up here to this ball. I'm sorry, back from the down the line view. I'm going to move these clubs. But I'm going to help everyone see this principle. Go ahead and sit up there again, please, to this ball. Okay. Now, the point Mike's making here is, you remember that we discussed how we drew a diagram for you about how the arms, when they were parallel to the ground, they had a grid of their own. And we said that they could be on the stance line when they came down, right, Mike? Which would look like that. Or when they came down, they could be inside, say, 20 degrees. Or they could be inside, say, 40 degrees. Or they could actually be outside, say, 20 degrees, right? Like that. And what Mike's saying to you is, go ahead and sit up there again, please, Mike, is that when the golfer comes down, for whatever reason, when the arm is parallel to the ground, if it's out too far like this, the golfer's in a dilemma here. He's either going to come and swing straight across the ball and slice it, okay? Or, as is often the case, he's going to have to do what, Mike?
Stand up, uncock my wrists.
Correct.
So the club will follow the inside.
Correct. And as he does that, by doing it with that procedure, the shaft angle at impact is significantly higher than it was at the setup. And if he has a turned grip, if he started with a turned grip, then he's going to hit the ball with the maximum turned face. Okay, so we demonstrate. Now, if he does this correctly, when he swings down, when this arm is parallel to the ground, this arm will be just inside the stance line, say on this 20-degree line. And if you did the follow-through now, Mike, if you turned back around and went towards the camera, okay, like this, we would also have the same alignments for the right arm. And that right arm could be, when it's parallel to the ground, sorry, could be along the line of the stance. It could be inside 20 degrees. It could be inside 40 degrees. Or it could be out 10 degrees. Correct?
Correct.
Now, when the golfer comes through, if he's tracing a circle, it would be inside 20 degrees with the arm on the downswing, and then on the follow-through, his right arm would be 20 degrees on the follow-through. That would be a circle for the hand path. Let's go over the variations now. One more time, please, Mike. If the golfer came down and his arm was in the most, and he did early extension, like that, that would raise the shaft up the most, swinging the club out to the right the most. If that golfer had a turned grip or a closed face, that would create the maximum curve to the left on the ball. Okay? Now, if the golfer came down, we took the other extreme. The golfer came out like this, too far. He would do the early extension, okay? The shaft would drop inward some, like this, okay? He would hit the ball with the shaft the highest, the face still closed, the ball would start straight and still curve behind him. Now, but Mike, what also happens to that golfer who comes out with the arm? How does he recognize his ball? And that is when he comes down again, okay? When that arm is out too far, that golfer is also subject to, when he comes down, not standing up enough, coming right on across the ball, and slicing the daylights out of it. So if you're the golfer who's hitting both the slap duck hook and the occasional slice, the place to start is, are your hands tracing a circle? Okay? If you're hitting both patterns. We find, that's fairly unusual though, wouldn't you say?
I'd say so.
Okay, most people are doing one or the other, but the person who's coming out the most, like this, usually doesn't have early extension. It's good players who usually come out like this and then extend back to drop the club. Most of our poorer players come out too fast, don't have the extension, and come right on across the ball. We want to distinguish though that if you have the pattern of both of those, then it's likely your arm is out too far. I think we should go into that now, Mike, about how power is created and about the width and why that's true. To do that, you want to go down the line and you want to get a driver. I think that will really demonstrate it the clearest. There's a lot of talk in golf instruction about width, the width of the arc and how that creates power. Mike mentioned that to hit this ball farther, when he swings down, first of all, he does his standard procedure on the backswing. One more time, please. Remember we said that the hands are supposed to move inward, not straight back, that the hips turn in their arc, the weight doesn't shift to the right. That puts the hands at the top of the swing behind the right shoulder, with the left arm along the shoulder line. As it comes down, when the left arm is parallel to the ground, it's inside the line of the feet. Now, as we reach the point where this shaft is parallel to the ground, you notice this angle, or the club shaft, and where the club head is. If the club head was back here, like this, the distance to the ball would be like almost 2 clubs. Okay? Now, if for whatever reason, at the same point with the shaft parallel to the ground, the distance of the club to the ball is much shorter. Okay? When people are talking about width in their swing, I think they get this concept confused, because the connotation, or maybe it's what people intend to say, is they think that taking the club back and making the arc wider, okay, stretching their arm out, coming back straighter, one more time, with the hands and the club coming back straighter, making the arc the widest, is going to make the ball go the furthest. Well, if Mike turns around here again, if he made a swing where he took the club back the straightest and the widest, Mike, would that be the fastest possible swing or the slowest?
That'd be the slowest. Couldn't hit the ball 100 yards.
Could not hit the ball 100 yards if the club did not go inward, if the hands did not go inward and the club did not go inward. Could not hit the ball. Okay, well, we've got the hands going inward. We know we're creating the angular momentum there. Now we've got to, as we come down, we've got to keep the shaft, okay? We've got to keep the shaft in enough so that there's still some angle out to the ball when the ball's hit. Okay, there's more power, our point is, okay? There's more power, okay, go ahead, Mike, in here than there is out here because there's more depth to the swing. The golfer needs to understand that. Now, this swing we mentioned is not solely designed to hit the ball the farthest, right, Mike?
Or just to hit it the straightest either.
Right. It's designed to hit the ball the farthest, the straightest.
The most often.
The most often. And because of that, we don't prescribe, as you come down again, Mike, that you get the club the farthest in that you possibly could, because not only would you be able to swing fast, but you would also be able to potentially generate a lot of curve on the ball. Okay? Now, there are some good players, Mike, who have put the club inside quite a bit and hit the ball a long, long way, but they've adjusted their stance line to illustrate this point. Who might they be?
Freddie Couples or J.B. Holmes.
Jack Nicklaus?
Jack Nicklaus.
Okay,
Yep.
how do they do that? We just show how their stance line?
Well, they stand aiming to their stance line to the left.
So they aim to the left, okay? And then when they swing, when they come down, they shift this club back behind them to keep their radius the longest, okay? They would never make a swing where the club comes down and the club is actually outside parallel to the ground with the shaft. That would make the descent the steepest. That would make the